All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome. Just a few more people. Sorry, we're starting a little bit late. We had a small technical glitch, but we're back on line now, so all good. Thank you for your time. As usual, we always appreciate the opportunity to share some of the information around our lunch and learns and different topics today. We're really thrilled to have Jared Timms join us from Howden Insurance. One of the most regular questions we get asked as a team is around cyber insurance reviews and what are some of the check-in points, when do we need it? It's a whole new world for a lot of people. So we've asked the expert himself to come along and share some of his industry knowledge as well. Roy will have some input, one of our great IT managers, and then we'll, as always, have time for questions from the floor. Up the top in the bar, you'll see a Q&A section. Feel free to pop your question in there anytime during the presentation, and we'll read them out at the end. So without further ado, Jared, over to you.
Hi everyone, and thanks Anna. I will just start by sharing my screen so I can bring this presentation up. First of all, just a quick overview on Howden. We're a global insurance broking firm, risk consulting and people risk. We're headquartered in the UK. We've been around for 30 years. We operate in over 50 countries, and we now handle over $40 billion in premium annually. Cyber insurance premiums being a rapidly growing segment of that premium pool. So I'm just going to give quite a high level overview of the state of cyber, break down policy coverage a little bit, the types of risk management controls that insurers want to see in place, and touch upon who needs cyber. So cyber is essentially defined as anything associated with computers, information technology, or virtual reality. We've transformed from an industrial era into a digital age, probably underpinned by the growth since the dot-com boom. And now, obviously, there's vast amounts of online business transactions. Something that drove the cyber threat landscape was the shift to work from home following COVID lockdowns, which also led to heightened use of cloud migration and third-party collaboration tools to perform our jobs, such as Zoom, Teams, Xero, SharePoint, Salesforce, etc. So the digital age is also underpinned by the largest businesses globally, all being tech-focused, such as Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, and Google. And the entire functionality of most businesses now solely relies on technology, even the most tangible sectors. The most common cyber threats that we're seeing in the economy, malware is very high up there, and there's various kinds of malware. So we've seen ransomware, Trojans, and worms, which are varying types of malicious software. Phishing, which is basically an attempt to trick someone in the organization to download malware through fraudulent emails with links to malware software. And financial theft, so social engineering fraud is one in particular, where the hackers will pretend to be someone in the business who's in a position of trust, such as the CFO, and trick other staff into doing things like transferring funds. Push payment fraud is another type, and funds transfer and invoice manipulation are other common cyber attacks that we have seen. This data is a little bit old, but not that old, only a couple of years, but the cyber landscape moves quite quickly. But as you can see there, the biggest driver of claims activities has been theft of funds. Social engineering played a major part in that, but they're the most frequent. The most severe have been ransomware attacks, which is essentially the malicious software that hackers will download, and essentially it will encrypt all of the data on your network and prevent you from accessing the network and being able to transact. So the basic controls that the cyber insurers want to see in place, VPNs are very important when working from home. Multi-factor authentication across all devices and softwares, whether it's email or cloud services. Interestingly, the attack that took place on Medibank was actually a result of them not having multi-factor authentication in place when accessing the VPN. The hackers managed to steal the passwords of a senior executive member, and when they went to log in the VPN, it was made rather easy because there was no multi-factor authentication. So having that extra layer of protection in place could have potentially prevented that attack from taking place. The hackers, or the insurers also want to see encryption of data, not only when at rest on the network, but also when in transit and when in backup. Regular backups are another important defense. Incident response and business continuity planning. And I'll touch on this later, but business continuity planning can essentially be linked to the policy because the policy offers a incident response manager. And essentially the business continuity plan can be as simple as everyone in the organization knowing who to contact when you know that there may have been a cyber event, and for that person to know who to contact, being the incident response manager from the insurer. Software updates, automatic, are important. Staff awareness training, because that can help prevent things like the phishing attacks that we just touched on before, where suspicious emails come through and people click on dodgy links. Updating passwords, as well as segregation of duties, and that comes to when transferring funds or amending master supplier lists and bank details. Who is responsible for the cyber attack? So there's 5 key groups. Script kids are basically the teenagers operating out of their parents' basement who are either doing it for fun or for fame. Organised crime groups, and these operate very much like legitimate businesses. They have real business functions and certain divisions such as software development teams just building ransomware to try and inflict on businesses. National states, so they hack for global advantage for their country. So think about perhaps the threat that you've probably heard about in the media from countries like Russia or China, and they're trying to attack military bases and things like that. Hacktivists, so politically motivated, things like WikiLeaks, and insiders, which might just be a disgruntled internal employee who steals information to sell. So what does the cyber policy actually cover? I touched on it before, but incident response management is a very important function of the policy. It's essentially a service rather than your traditional sort of insurance payout. So most of the insurers will outsource this to the likes of McGrath Nickel or Clyde & Co. Some insurers have actually bought it in-house, which is, to be honest, my preference. And it's a really good service because essentially it's your one-stop shop. You reach out to your incident response manager, and what they will do is either investigate the matter, and they can either determine if you have been, if you've suffered a breach or not. And if they know that you have, they can get the wheels in motion to sort of stem the bleeding really quickly. And what they'll do is reach out to each of the third-party panel providers who they've already done their due diligence on. They've agreed and negotiated sort of reduced rates, and they'll reach out to the required third parties, which might include forensic IT investigation, which will get into the system and find where the hole is that the hackers managed to exploit, patch the hole to prevent further damage, public relations for large corporates who might need to manage any reputational risk, customer notification, letting all the customers who have had their data breached aware, privacy lawyers to help navigate the situation, legal defense if you happen to get sued for the mismanagement of handling data, fines and penalties from the regulators, business interruption for lost revenue when your system was down, tangible property for destroyed laptops and other hardware, and criminal financial loss, so reimbursement of the funds which were lost. And so basically to finish, who needs cyber insurance? Almost every business in the world has a cyber exposure. Whether you operate online, send or receive wire payments, process sensitive data, even a small business have a cyber exposure. And in fact, over 60% of cyber attacks target SMEs. So no one is too small or too large.
I might also throw to Roy. So Roy's one of our IT managers. Some of you will have the privilege of working with Roy, and just ask the question to you, Roy. What are you seeing, and what have you noticed is a common question around cyber insurance and a common need around cyber insurance for our clients?
Yeah, I think it's just the first thing, probably just how often that you should be talking cyber insurance with your IT provider. And yeah, this can be vary depending on the business needs and circumstances. If the business implementing a new system or a security incident happen, this will be a really good time to actually talk with your IT provider. But if the situation normal, once a year, it's really good. You can discuss this, include this into your IT strategy meeting or during your renewal policy process with your insurers. Yeah, I think it's a good time. And if sometime it's asking, if I've been breached, do we call IT first or do we call the insurer first? It's depend on the policy. Some insurer expect you to contact them first so they can direct your response if required, but contacting your IT is also important to help assess the situation, contains the breach and start the recovery process if necessary. Yeah, but this is where a playbook is really valuable to establish some criteria with the insurer for the scenario they want to be called first, and other where they are happy the IT partner to be called first. So it's really depend on your policy.
Can I add something to that, Roy? Just before I let you keep going. We've had some good conversations with organizations developing playbooks, particularly around that aspect of who do I call first, even just down to simple things like put the phone number of the insurance company in the playbook. And then that way, on that dreaded day, you're not wondering. We know some insurance providers provide an app, and you just push the big red button in the app, and that makes it really easy for them to engage. It is important to know in advance whether you need to contact your insurance provider first or not, because you don't want to do anything to invalidate your insurance. You want to make sure that you're still covered all the way through. So it's a really good topic to explore with your provider. And we have found in every case, providers love having the conversation. So don't be afraid to give them a bell and do explore that question. They may well say, for this scenario, call us. For this scenario, don't bother calling us. Just get straight into it. But it's certainly one worth talking about.
Thanks, Liam. Yeah, and the last question probably that quite popular is just what sort of action that we can do to decrease, the chance to having, to lean on our insurance to, get attack and everything. So the first one is implement a robust security control. You need to have an antivirus, a good firewall. You got some software that intrusion detection system, and keep all your system up to date, and regular employee training and awareness. That's also good and recommend. And having a password policy, like strong password policy, a minimum of 15 character. You can use passphrase, a combination of lowercase, uppercase, symbol, and number. That's also good. And having a lock user account policy, if after a certain fail attempt, the user will get locked and you need to contact IT to unlock it, or like certain period it will unlock. And use password manager for all staff and require them to have unique password for everything. And you also need to do multi-factor authentication for all your system, and document an incident response plan, and you do rehearse regularly to ensure that your organization is prepared. And last, probably using the single sign-on whenever you're possible on every year, your system and software.
Fantastic. Those are some good recommendations, Roy. And I just wondered if between Liam, yourself, and Jared, maybe you could each think of one. But I think often the challenge is we think it won't happen to us, or the cyber risk isn't in front of our faces every day. Our job is to walk the line of not fear-mongering, but education. What are some real examples, I guess, of recent breaches you've seen? Touch wood, not many, but they do happen in some of our business dealings that can help, I guess, land that this actually is a risk and it does happen. And so managing your cyber security is good governance and practice. Liam, can you think of one? I'm sure you can.
There's nothing like going first. Everyone else has to try and scramble for something. Yeah, I think I can. The right way to explain this, in all of our playbooks, there's a line will be in there probably multiple times, but at least once, which is when you're reporting this incident, be careful not to inflame the incident by sharing more information than you should. And so trying to choose the right words here to make sure that I'm careful with the details. Something which I have found many organizations don't assess as a cyber threat, but it is a perfect match, is insider threat. So you have all of the people inside your organization, they already have access to a whole bunch of data, IP, PII, people's information about your customers and so on. They need that data to do their job. But how do you know that they're using it just to do their job and not doing the wrong thing with that information, or even being seen to be doing the wrong thing? So something that we see happen, either legitimately happen or be suspected to happen, I would say at least quarterly, and possibly more often than that across the environments we support. This question is coming up. What matters in this scenario is that people who are having this suspicion know how to identify it. How do I, go, that looks odd, see something, say something, all of those kinds of phrases. But then how do I raise this query with my IT partner, and are the right systems already in place for us to actually do an investigation and know if it has happened or not? Because in that event, you're likely about to have a fairly challenging or unpleasant conversation with somebody. You really want to be confident and make sure you've got your facts all lined up, or that's certainly how I would want to feel going into that. So knowing how to gather the information and that the data is prepared or set up in a format that it can be interrogated so that you can go in confidently to say whatever is needed to be said in that process. But yeah, insider threat is, I would say, at the top of the list of the things that come across my desk at the moment.
Thanks, Liam. Jared, are you able to share any that you're kind of seeing as a common threat in the industry at the moment?
Not so much common, or well, it could be, but I was at a conference this week and the topic of AI came up. And what was interesting was there were a lot of lawyers in the room, and they were talking about online meetings and using a note-taking AI tool. and they'd made a decision after some time to stop using that because they realised they weren't comfortable taking notes via this platform when they didn't know where the notes were being stored, and they were taking notes about sensitive information that's being provided to them by their clients, such as financials and business plans. And that was just an interesting takeaway from me. So I thought that's a good one to share.
Awesome. Thank you. And Roy, have you got one that comes to mind? You're on mute, my friend.
Oh, sorry. No, I don't. Sorry.
No, that's totally fine. One I heard recently, and maybe Liam, if you remember it, you can speak to it, but the idea of the third-party application being a cyber threat and a connection and a port into an organisation. Do you see that much?
I'm fortunate to not have dealt with one personally, which is long may it last. It does seem to be the scapegoat that we see whenever something happens that's media worthy, and a large organisation is unfortunately needing to declare that they've had a compromise. I would say in the vast majority of cases, it's quickly followed by, but don't worry, it wasn't our systems that were compromised. It was such and such a third party that we subcontract blah, blah, blah to. Those were the bad guys here. And it just highlights that these organizations probably don't have a suitable supplier process when they're adopting new suppliers. Are they interrogating those suppliers effectively? Is that supplier equipped? And are their security systems operating at the level that yours are so that you can be confident your customer data is still safe? One of the other things that happens, I think, all too often, and I know, we wrestle with this ourselves constantly. When you do set up some kind of a third-party connection, be it with a consultant or a workforce team or another application which has API access into your systems and is looking at your data, the temptation during testing is to hand over lots of access. Let's get them everything they need. Let's make sure the connection is strong. Let's open up all of the channels. And then later on, we'll tune it back. And later on never comes. And they have all of this access that was suitable in testing with test data, but is absolutely not suitable with production environments. And now this organization that was only ever meant to see a slither of information can see way too much. And so no one's even looking for the compromise because no one expects it to even be possible. But that later on, after testing, just doesn't happen. And these organizations find themselves caught out. And again, we wrestle with it personally, and it is a painful and frustrating one because this is the story of what you get sold in the sales process about what's possible. And then when you actually get on the ground and you find out, it just doesn't work that way. And being diligent to wrestle those problems to the ground. Otherwise, we just make ourselves, we lower our security standards again and again, and that's not really okay.
Absolutely. I've got a question here in terms of what is our view on KeePass or a similar password manager application, and are those applications actually safe? Who would like to answer that?
I'd love to hear what Jared has to say about that and whether it impacts insurance policies at all.
That may be a bit too techie for me.
Does the use of password management utilities make a difference from the insurance policy? Are you guys looking for that kind of thing, or it's not a factor?
It's not really questioned. They talk about password updates, but not so much storage, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, good one. Certainly from my perspective, it's something that we would recommend. I put it in the bucket of, if you're going to ask your staff to meet password requirements, you need to give them the tool to do so. You should be asking your staff to never reuse a password. And if you're like me, you've got quite a few systems that you log into every day. It's not achievable to have a different password that doesn't include, IT department -0-2024 is my password combination for every app I use. If you want people to have good passwords, you just have to give them the tools to do it. And yeah, a suitable password management platform is critical. Yeah.
And in terms of, and I'll finish up on this question for you guys, I'd love to hear, Jared, how often should people be going to market for their cyber insurance, either in a health check form or in an actual full review scenario?
I think the cyber market's changed a lot over the years. So I guess how it started out was you had a number of insurers all competing for market share because they wanted to build up their premium pool and become a big player in the space. So with that, you had a lot of insurers not asking a lot of questions and just basically taking on clients willy-nilly to try and build their market share. That's kind of 2015 to 2018 era. From there, you've seen a rise in claims as cyber attacks became more frequent. And from there, you had increasing rates. So insurers, every renewal was slapping on 30 to 40% increases, and that was purely due to the wider amounts of attacks that they were suffering and their increasing claims frequency and losses. Where we're at now is the attacks have probably plateaued a little bit, and the increases in rates have made their portfolios sustainable. And what we're starting to see now is a number of new players, new credible players who have probably sat on the sidelines, formulated more actuarial data in terms of in order to be able to predict what's going to happen in terms of claims trends in the future. So it's not necessarily something you want to do frequently, but I guess having a broker who understands what's happening in the market and how things are changing is a good discussion point every year. But with that, at the moment, with so many new players, it probably is a good time to explore alternatives and look at what other competitive offers are out there, because we have had at least 3 to 5 new players enter the market in the last sort of 12 months. So a couple of them are really credible, and we're happy to recommend them, and we are approaching them to obtain alternative options for our clients.
I've got just one quick extension question on that concept. Are we, in terms of premiums rising and new players coming into the market, are there things that an organisation can or should be doing to reduce their premiums, or is reducing premiums a pipe dream, and actually all we can hope to do is to remain eligible by ticking certain criteria so that the providers who we want to deal with will actually talk to us? But at the end of the day, the premium is just going to keep on creeping up. What are your thoughts there, Jared?
Yeah, we are seeing premiums plateau at the moment. So any increases would probably be in line with business growth. Because the risk has increased as your business grows, and the more data you have and the more employees you have and things like that. In terms of controls, what we're seeing is that if you don't have certain things in place, insurers are holding back on offering certain coverage. So recently we had a renewal whereby the client had encryption of their data whilst in backup and at rest, but not in transit. And the insurers were not, they put an encryption exclusion on the policy as a result, and they expected them to rectify that risk management issue in order to offer that coverage. So whilst the price didn't come down because of the exclusion, the coverage wasn't there, but then to put that risk management tool in place and then to put that coverage, rectify that coverage issue and offer the cover, they didn't actually increase the premium in order to offer it as well. So it's more about whether you're an insurable risk or not, as opposed in terms of the controls that you've got in place, rather than whether it's going to impact your costs. The competition in the market in terms of the new insurers entering the market and trying to gain market share is going to be the bigger driver of costs, as is claims activity and general attacks taking place across the economy.
And without putting too fine a point on it, we want to be with preferred providers because they're more picky about their customers, and so their premiums are not going to go up so much. Is that an unreasonable assessment, or is that fair to say?
That's fair to say. I'll add an additional layer to that. So years ago, look, there's a number of local insurers in Australia, and then we've got offshore insurers as well. So There was a time when there was a London player who I really liked their offering, and we used to use them a lot. But what we saw was their renewals, they were jacking them up every single time. And what we found as a result of that, or the reason behind that, was because they were insuring many different regions and countries, they were getting a wider range of claims because they've got a bigger geographical footprint. Whereas the insurers solely focused on Australia weren't getting hit as hard because they had a much smaller geographical footprint. So their claims performance was much better, which meant they were more stable. And as a result of that, I've shifted my mentality and I've sort of been trying to use local players as much as possible if the appetite is here, regardless of if an overseas player is cheaper or on par.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Awesome. Well,
Did
with
you,
that, we might.
I was happy to answer a couple more of your questions, Anna, if you like, as well. I think there was one around invalidating the cyber insurance.
Yep, fantastic. Yeah, is there a way? Well, you've got the question there, but for the benefit of the group, the question is there things that we can do that invalidate cyber insurance as much as there's things that we can do to qualify? Jared, go ahead. You have the floor.
Yeah, I actually went and took this up with an underwriter. So I've got their response in writing here, and they replied with, generally speaking, there isn't really anything the insured can do to invalidate their cyber insurance. Most policies will have conditions around the insured working with us to preserve evidence of the breach so we can properly assess and investigate the claim. We also require full cooperation from the insured with us and any panel vendors we engage. One of the key things that can cause problems is when insureds go and incur their own costs in responding to a cyber event without the approval of the insurer and not using their panel providers. They need to be made aware of what the costs are to be incurred to ensure they are fair and reasonable before you go and incur them.
That's really good. So in terms of landing that concept for a real life scenario, you're talking about the preservation of evidence, as well as making sure you're not going and hiring a cyber response team prior to getting approval. Is that basically the nutshell, the takeaway?
Yeah, well, just to add to it, I spoke, hopefully you heard me, but you might not have, if I was breaking up. The incident response management services attached to the policy are really good. So a number of insurers do outsource this to the likes of Clyde & Co and McGrath Nickel. One of my preferred insurers has an in-house incident response manager. So the other question I asked them, is there any penalty for sort of reaching out to the incident response manager if you just suspect you might have had a claim? And they said there is no penalty. Our in-house incident response management team will discuss any potential claim scenario, and it will not trigger an excess unless there was a cyber event or they have to engage the specialists. But their feedback was that they would actually prefer that you contact them if you just suspect there's been a hacking, because their expertise and experience has helped them talk clients through the potential scenarios and minimize any impact if a claim was potentially about to happen. So it could be that they suspect there's been a claim because of the suspicious activity they've seen. It might not yet be a cyber event, but that activity may be leading to an event. So they could be right in their suspicions, and the insurer's been able to prevent the attack from happening through that information.
Nice one. Thank you. Were there any other questions that we had on the table left, Jared? Nope, all good. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for your time. We really appreciate you making time on your lunch break. Sorry for the audio, but what I will do, if it's all right with Jared, is chase down the slides and maybe get some notes from what we heard so that we could, send it out to you afterwards. And hopefully if it's raised any questions, our team is here to answer them for you. What that looks like, we We love to get you ready before any event occurs and hopefully prevent one ever happening. So that's a conversation we will always welcome. I'd also say if you're looking for someone to talk to or need an insurance review, we've found Jared and his team really helpful, knowledgeable, and I would recommend them hands down. So yeah, do reach out if you'd like a connection as well. I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful Wednesday and Thursday. Just one a day. And we'll talk soon. Take care.
Thanks,
Thank
Anna.
you.
Thanks, Jared.
Cheers.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
Jared.